Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this live broadcast, the Blood Guilty live stream, as I have entitled this. And I'm very glad and I'm very surprised, actually, that even before we started the live stream, there are already people present, which tells me that I don't think just us. I think many people are hanging on this topic and what we're going to talk about and want to express their points of views. And if you notice, in speaking of the comment section, I want to welcome everybody. There's already 5 people that are live with us watching. Thank you for being here, and thank you for always supporting the CO visit. And you'll notice in the comment section, I have put, and I'll put it several times as we go, the link to the live stream if you want to join us here in the studio and give your thoughts and feelings on this most recent new light from, as I always like to say, mein Herr Losch. Herr Losch, with his new epiphany, his new revelation, not only about blood, but about the law and the law's reach in Christian lives, which I think was also very, very interesting, very telling. Welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Jeff. You see, we have Jeff and Matthew here with us today. I hope you're both well. And as I said before, please join us if you want to. Anyone that's watching right now, find the link there. I'll be copying it several times because as the comments run, it gets lost. So I will put that in there. So Sheila is also here. Okay. Let's see. Sheila, you might want to go out, Sheila. Let me see here. Maybe she's on now. So let me see her. Okay, Sheila, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. Well,
hello, good to be with you.
So since, as far as I remember, this is the first time Sheila has been with us here in the live stream. So why don't we start with you, Sheila, if you'd like, and just tell us, because I just want to make a clarification beforehand. There's no end game or outcome that we're trying to reach with this particular live stream, at least not today. I think we can get to one eventually. I do think this issue has an explanation and has a black and white answer, but right now everybody's reeling, right? Everybody's in this kind of free spin in the air. We're all kind of shell-shocked by what we just heard. So let's start off by kind of going around the panel here and getting everyone's impression of this most recent new light. So Sheila, why don't you go ahead?
Colin, if I may interject.
Yes, go ahead.
Looks like Sheila is having to persevere a bit there. There seems to be a technical thing.
Sheila, are you there?
Back.
Yeah, that's it. I'm back on again.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, I had to add you in. So Sheila, we're gonna go around here and just kind of get everyone's feeling on this most recent information and announcement from the governing body. So why don't you start us off? Let us know what's your impression of this whole thing.
I think it's a shocker. I mean, I've been associated with the witnesses since I was 9 years old, and the blood was always a no-no in every circumstance. Then I've looked transplants. They relax the transplants, but the blood, I really don't know what to say. They make it to clarification, which it's not. It's a complete change. Clarification is only expounding on what's already an accepted norm. So to actually stand up and do that and actually lie, they've actually exposed who they are. They're just nothing but liars, covered up with legal loopholes. And I don't know how the courts or people are going to get around this. I hope it wakens people up, but they're so indoctrinated that they're absolutely blinded. But there's an interesting scripture, and I don't want to really bring religion into it, that Satan blinds the mind of the unbelievers. So who are they? Those that don't believe in the supreme or superior authority. And so they can't see it. They're hidden behind a veil and they just don't see it. I find it so, so sad. I think that's
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheila, for your point of view there. Very, very true. One thing I want to mention that you mentioned: don't be afraid or sad to bring in religion, so to speak, or to bring in scripture when we're talking about this topic. That doesn't mean we have to believe, or that we have to, like, we're believing what the Jehovah's Witnesses believe, or any of that. You can be an atheist, you can be, but we want to attack this from an angle according to how they believe, from their belief system.
Yeah.
So that we understand what they're saying, what they're doing. And so that's okay to bring in, I have several scriptures actually that I'm going to bring up here during the podcast because of what Garrett Losh mentioned, which I thought was very interesting. He chose a very interesting scripture to kind of justify this, which I thought was just weird. So, but we'll get to that in a moment. Jeff, what was your impressions?
I may have something of a dissenting opinion, but I really think it's, at least at its face, it's not the big deal people think it is. The main reason is, if you look at what they're, quote unquote, allowing now, in practice, it only really allows for, blood under a very, very specific set of circumstances that in the real world is not going to happen that much. When people start having to face the issue from a medical point of view with this new information, this new whatever understanding, whatever they want to call it, when they have to face it, I think people are going to realize it's going to be much the same. Maybe they're allowing a little bit more, but really not allowing more than they absolutely have to. The only way I think the other two things that came to my mind as well, as far as like using this to potentially wake somebody up, is to just compare to the Pharisees. You think of how the Pharisees were with all these rules. You have this big principle of this very simple written law, but then they break it down to the point where, okay, what does work mean on the Sabbath? Oh, what does it mean to harvest on the Sabbath? And, the Bible examples that we grew up learning, that when it comes to blood, the governing body is doing the same thing. So, hopefully some people will either see it that way, or you can bring it to their attention, and that might help them to see the organization for who it is, and that really isn't any different than the Pharisees. But yeah, those were my initial thoughts.
Okay, very good, and thank you. Don't worry about I don't think it's a dissenting opinion. Those are very valid. and definitely, I mean, admittedly, there is with what they're saying here, the use of one's own blood, one's own stored blood. Obviously, that's going to be a very limited situation and time period that you can use something like that, where you can't store blood for long periods, extended periods of time. So it has to be something emergent. It has to be something fairly recent. But we'll get to that in a moment. So, Matthew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Colin, what are my thoughts? They run many and run heavy, but thanks for inviting that. So, I was thinking what to say, because we're talking about something that isn't just a policy adjustment, right? So is there a gentle way to actually step in and widen the lens as to what's going on? Because for many, this touches on and you brought it in opening statements there, Colin, and I'm still, processing that and going, it touches on, as you rightly say, life and death decisions, family loss, and years of deeply held belief. And in an administrative snap of the fingers, there's this change. So I hear where Jeff is coming from in a grounded way, and I think that's a very good point that he mentions there, and I want to validate that. But I also see incoming persons who are reaching out and feeling, Colin, anger. There's been waves of anger. There's been waves of disgust. There's been even relief. Persons who felt guilty for decades, and now suddenly there's a change. They're going, why was I guilty? Why did I feel social pressure, all of this guilt that I was carrying for years, when it just is a big nothing, And so there's this confusion that's coming in, even numbness. And I think in healing community, I look at it, or many look at it as saying, well, we've got to validate these kind of feelings and share very, very honestly, very, very candidly, maintain the respect, maintain decorum, because there are people here at different stages just processing this. And I'm hearing a lot of anger, and it makes sense, because when something that is a belief that's presented as an absolute truth with this heavy pathway to judge it and to inflict disciplinary action, be it in a tribunal, be it with some kind of restriction or emotional ties to family, very, very close, very, very intimate. And now that evaporates to a matter of conscience. You can relate empathetically to say this is disorientating and unjust. So, trying to express that without turning on each other and trying to be sensitive, it's complex, Colin. That's my best shot.
Absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, what I want to start by speaking about is actually Garrett Lush's presentation of this, how he brought it up. And this is a sensitive topic. This is a very sensitive topic. And I had, even through the video, even through a digital, not being with him face to face, I had a feeling of unease from him as he was giving this announcement. It seemed like he was kind of like, oh boy, let's see, here we go, right? Like, I'm putting this out there, I'm actually going to say it. And I think he says a lot in his silence as well. I think he says a lot in his omission of what he didn't say, because, okay, they opened up the possibility to Jehovah's Witnesses to use your own stored blood for medical procedures. That's a conscience issue. And interestingly, that's blood, whole blood. He didn't say anything about fractions. He didn't say anything about any of that. He just said your blood. So I take that as, okay, he's basically putting it out there and saying, hey, you can use your own blood. We won't ask, don't tell, right? We're not going to ask what you do with it, and don't tell us. That's what I got out of it, because they've been very, very precise in recent decades about what parts of blood you can use and what fractions of blood you can use. And so now they just came out and said you can use your own blood. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that if there are any witnesses out there that might be eavesdropping on this conversation, which is fine, that we understand, okay, let's not pay attention to these irrelevant trivialities when it comes to, because I know what a lot of witnesses are going to say. Yeah, but he said one's own blood. one's own blood. Oh, that's a difference, right? And they're going to use that as a like somehow that's different. Okay? Whether we're talking about using your own blood or somebody else's blood, it's the same thing. Okay? A transfusion is a transfusion, whichever way you look at it. So Garrett Lush was very careful not to use that word because transfusion for a Jehovah's Witness is like traumatizing to use that word. But what struck me about it was, and I think this was very intentional, was the fact that, and I wrote it down here, let me just check. He used the scripture in Leviticus 17:13 to basically as the base of saying, hey, we're not bound by this anymore. And it was really funny to me because as far as I can remember, this was never, even though it's very close to the other one, but this particular text was not one that they ever used to justify us not using blood. They never used this scripture. And all of a sudden he comes out and he reads Leviticus 17:3, which says to the effect of, if an Israelite or a foreigner within their territory is hunting and he kills an animal, he must drain out the blood and cover it with dirt or cover it with dust. Okay? And then Lush says, well, the question here is, are Christians bound by the law? And laws like this one. And he says the short answer is no. And I thought, wow, that speaks volumes to me. Because the other scripture that I thought he would have used, which would be the scripture they always used, is a few scriptures before that. It's Leviticus 17:11. Leviticus 17:11 says, for the life of a creature is in the blood. Now this is God speaking directly. The life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Okay, so that's the scripture that they usually used. But there's a problem with that. That's God speaking there. So the governing body knew that they could not be so audacious as to use that same scripture where God is speaking himself and say, oh, well, we don't believe in this anymore. That would be, for Jehovah's Witnesses, that would be crazy. They had to separate themselves from that particular scripture. They had to put some distance between them and God's very word. So what did he do? He chose another scripture that was a little bit more ambiguous, wasn't God speaking directly, and it was something about hunting, right? So basically, he said, well, look at this scripture. It's a precept about hunting. We're not bound by that. That's a lot easier to say than Leviticus 17:11, which is God's voice directly saying, I've given you blood for this purpose. Do not use it, right? Don't eat it. Don't, because it would sound like they're going against God directly, right? So they very, very carefully and purposefully chose a different scripture that sounds more innocuous. It sounds more logical, right? Like, oh, we're not hunting anymore like that, like the Israelites did, and we don't have to worry about that. You go and buy your meat at the supermarket. You don't have to worry about draining the blood and all of that. We're not under that anymore. So to me, it spoke volumes. As I mentioned before, for the first time ever that I remember, a governing body member came out and said directly that Christians are not bound by the law. Wow, that was news for me. Even though, yes, that's why it's inexcusable. That's why it's unforgivable. Of course we're not. If you're a Christian, of course you're not bound by the law. They should know that. They should have always known that. The Bible is so clear about that, what Jesus came for, what the purpose was for his sacrifice, and what was the result of that. That it freed people from the bondage of the law. All those precepts and sacrifices and atonements and going to the temple 3 times a year, and like the eunuch had to do all the way from Ethiopia, come all the way to crossing a continent, to, you know, things like that. It freed us from all of that. And all of a sudden, they're saying like this is a revelation. Oh, after careful prayer, we're not under the law anymore. That's unexcusable ignorance if that's what they're claiming, right? That's unexcusable for religious leaders to come out and say that now. But I think that, as I said, it's very interesting the way that they very, very carefully chose a certain scripture to give a base for this announcement. And they did it very carefully so that it doesn't sound like they're going against God. Of course, what is their approach to this as usual? Oh, it's a clarification. We're understanding this more clearly now. So, of course, the blame is shifted to God, right? Well, God didn't reveal it to us until now, right? Which, again, is absurd. It's completely absurd. So I'll just open up the panel. Sheila, Matthew, Jeff, anyone, just jump in, and if you'd like to give your point of view on anything.
I think you've covered it very well, Colin. Is that a cop-out?
Yeah.
You've done well, Colin.
Well, what I mentioned at the beginning, this is before actually we went live, and I want to mention this so everyone that's listening as well to the live stream, this is a very sensitive subject. Regardless of how, you know, with this step, as limited as it may be, it's still a huge step from where they were just a couple of days ago as far as their view on using blood. This is a huge change in that aspect. And the reason why this is so sensitive is because the blood issue, as I mentioned before, unlike some of the other ones that have been brought up, which are also very valid, like CSA and shunning and things like that. With the blood issue, this is an organization, just like politicians tend to do as well. This is an organization that has directly influenced and interfered in people's private medical decisions by saying, you know, in this case, if, you know, you need a blood transfusion, you have to say no. And they've crafted this whole system with the liaison committees, and which will be interesting to see what happens with that. I think the liaison committees may become more and more obsolete now that they made this decision. But there is a huge, huge potential for legal liability to come from this, because of the fact that this was a supposedly an interpretation of a biblically based rule in the Mosaic Law that they apply to our modern day, which has caused many Jehovah's Witnesses, children, including children, right, like we saw in the Awake magazine, to lose their lives because they did not receive a blood transfusion. That was something mandated by the organization. So,
Colin, if I may, can I interject a little bit?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And my motive is to kind of take some of the heat off you, I hope, because you're doing a lot of the cognitive work here. But yes, the other thing too is I want to acknowledge you've been doing this for a very long time. You've seen the patterns. You're quite aware of how things go. But what stood out to many, and I want to run this past you, wasn't just the content, and you were zooming in on Gerrit Loesch here. It was the way it was delivered, right? Because it felt very, very structured, very deliberate, like a manuscript, something carefully prepared, rather than Gerrit sitting back and there's no teleprompter and it's spontaneous. I certainly didn't get that. I didn't get the feeling that this was a spontaneous thing. But we've got other evidence here, don't we? We've got other evidence that we know it's not spontaneous. And so can we commit to what that is? What about the chatter that happened prior to Friday, which is the normal release of a governing body update, traditionally speaking. It's normally scheduled for that. And I'm gonna put it this way: was the chatter just persons who have been ejected from an abusive system, or the system has worn them down, or they've been removed because they're a potential liability, or actually there was widespread involvement from in the heart of the system that was revealing what Gerrit was going to say, so much so that you can compare between the chatter and what was said, and there is in fact little to no variance. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Am I making sense? Because at the time we saw, Friday, we saw conversations on the Friday begin almost immediately at what was it, turn 1 o'clock in SAST time, South African time. So conversations began almost immediately among active associates, members as well, which tells you that this isn't just an external reaction. People inside are processing this in real time. When we talk about people, we're talking even about elders, we're talking about people right in the heart of the system. And I think that's where the weight of this reality, if you want to call it a reality, this unreal reality sits, because when something that is presented for decades, like you were saying, as a matter of life and death, suddenly shifts in tone, it doesn't just raise questions, it stirs emotions on every level. And one of the things that's coming in is there fracture going on? Is this representing fracture? And is Gerrit just a puppet that's being told, no, Spin City here and legal department has put this together and you need to release this now. You need to do that and stick to the script, Gerrit. That's all you need to do.
What I was thinking, I mean, I've been saying this for a while, but it's like, if they wanted to backtrack the blood doctrine, you have to do it quietly. Like, I don't understand. So if it were me, what you would do is get rid of the liaison, the HLCs, just make them disappear. So there's no watchdog. And instead of making it like a public announcement, you keep it quiet and have the circuit overseers pass the information on by word to the elders. Like, what purpose did it serve? And like, you're only going to make things worse presenting it the way you did. So in a way, that goes to show, if you're a witness who's questioning, you have to, like, the way they presented it, you have to question if this organization is run by like Jehovah or by Holy Spirit. Because the way they presented it, the way they tried to change it, is nothing good is going to come of it. It would have made more sense to just quietly let it go away. You make it quiet, and I can guarantee you, if you stop printing, if you get rid of the HLC, in 10 years from now, all the younger kids that don't grow up knowing what we know are going to have no idea what this whole blood thing was. But you make an announcement like that, and now it's a big deal in everybody's face, and they have to face it. So that's just one thing that I was thinking about.
Oh, for sure. This could have been handled with a letter.
Yeah.
Have the circuit overseer take it to the congregations, read a letter only for them. Here's a question I want to throw out there, guys. I want to throw this question out there and see what everyone thinks about. Also, those of you who are listening in the live stream, in the chat, you can also put your ideas down, what you think about this. As I mentioned before, when I saw the announcement, I sensed great discomfort on the part of Gerrit Lesch giving this announcement. Kind of like he knew, like, oh boy, once I say this, I can't take it back, right? Like, here it goes. I'm going to say this, okay? And kind of going off of what Jeff said as well, why did the governing body, of all things, why did they feel the need to make this announcement about blood? let's stop and think about this for a second. Something must be coming that we don't really know about yet. Something must be coming down the pike here that they know about, that they're trying to get out in front of. Because right now, they have, or we're all waiting, an active Supreme Court decision in Norway about shunning, right? That they could potentially lose millions of dollars of state funding if that decision is not favorable. However, they've made no such announcements about shunning. In fact, they've doubled down on it. They've said, we don't use that word. Oh, that's a word apostates made up. So I think that Watchtower feels very confident that the decision in Norway is going to be favorable. They're not worried about that. They're not worried about the shunning issue. There is no such lawsuit right now. There is no such Supreme Court case remotely close. There's none about blood. And yet they felt the need to come out and make this decision public about blood. Again, my question is, why? What do they know that we don't know yet? What are they foreseeing that's coming around the bend that they needed to get out in front of? They must be terrified. Whatever it is that's coming, they're worried about it. And that's the feeling that I got from Garrett Lush.
Well, I know there's one or two countries that are actually looking at this aspect of it. They're not looking at the doctrines, they look at it, the conduct and the behaviour. And I think the more that's coming out, one way or another, on different subjects, the courts are finding ways to actually stamp down on the inhumane behaviour that is shown by these high control religions. And I think that what's happening is that they're protecting themselves legally with the legal loopholes that they can scramble through, that they have to put it out, as you say, before it happens. So they're fitting in more with the mainstream religions. And I found it interesting they gave it to Loesch and not one of the younger, more corporate elders or governing body members. Somebody that's a die-hard in the teachings of the doctrines. So they've given that to one of the older ones, whereas the younger ones don't quite understand the same as the ordinary J-dubs, that the young ones don't recognise what's happening. They've no comparison, whereas we as the older ones do have all these comparisons. So we know what they've done in the years past. You can't obliterate that one, and you can't pretend it hasn't happened, because it has, and we remember it. Plus, of course, the publications. No wonder they told you to get rid of them all.
Like, you know what that makes me think of too is I was thinking about that earlier today, but what, when they came up with the whole blood doctrine idea, like what like, why did they do it back then? And the only reason I can think of is like, they did it because they could. 50, 60 years ago, you could come up with something like that and people will follow you. And there was no real legal thinking behind it or anything. It just had to be a doctrine and people would take it. But, kind of with anybody that's listening to this, who's in and questioning, this is another line where you can think of, okay, is this organization really run by God? Because we would always be taught about like Jehovah's Chariot, and it can be on the move and it moves fast. The whole change of the blood thing now in 2026 is like so far behind the curve. Like if this organization were run by like God and Holy Spirit, say the doctrine would have changed. Don't you think it would have changed before society and culture started looking at it from a legal point of view instead of after? You have to ask yourself, if you're in and looking at this religion, is that something that God would do, or is that something humans will come up as being reactionary? But no, it's like I was thinking, just like I said, way back in whenever the 50s or whatever, when they started coming up with all the whole blood rules and all that. Well, yeah, back then, if you're a religion, you could do that. If you're a religion today, you can't do that. You can't do that. So it goes back to like what Sheila said, as far as them trying to be more mainstream.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense there. Sorry, Colin.
I think a lot of, just very brief here, and then go ahead, Matthew. A lot of these changes that they've made for the past year or so, 2 years, if God and the Holy Spirit were running this organization, all of these changes would have been made long before social media, long before internet, where all this stuff can get out, and everybody and their mother all over the world instantly can see these changes, debate them, criticize them. And like I agree with what Jeff is saying, that a lot of these things were kind of grandfathered in, so as to speak, because they became doctrines so long ago, long before computers and internet and all of that. So at that time, it was much easier to contain these things. Now, not so much. Like Jeff mentioned, if you're a religion today, you can't, come out and tell people, oh, well, you can't take blood, you can't do this, you can't do that. It doesn't work. So that was a very good point, Sheila. I didn't think about that, but yes, by them actually using Garrett Lush to give that announcement was not accidental either. Absolutely. Because he's from another time period that a lot of the older witnesses know about. So Matthew, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no, well, no, look, I appreciate that, Colin. Thanks for keeping it or keeping center there. Yeah, look, I'm assimilating what Sheila said, because I believe that's coming from a very grounded experience. And I look at your work, Sheila, and I don't mean to put you on a spot or make you feel awkward or anything like this, but I frequently get very good insights from you. Jeff also right on point. Again, I think your insights there, again, very, very sharp, and Colin too, same. So what we're seeing is a synthesis going on. So how can we name the reality without necessarily inflaming it? Maybe it should be inflamed, because for many the hardest part isn't just that something's changed, right? It's that previous decisions were made by or under a very different level of certainty, sometimes with life or death consequences. We're hearing that, we know this. The reports are coming in now. It's raising all of these memories, but it's also raising very difficult questions about responsibility. And this is why I talk about, do we inflame this or not? We want to try and keep this thing very, very responsible, because how we process that as a community, that opens the door without, accusing and shutting doors. Because, if we say something like, well, you look at the wake of collateral damage, you got to say, hold on here, Matt. Can you soften the wording, not the truth? Don't soften the truth, soften the wording. Because instead of saying it directly, I think it would be important to say something like, for some families, the impact of earlier teachings, it's not theoretical, it's not imagination, it's deeply personal. And in some cases, it's irreversible. And that's hard, but hopefully we can frame it with dignity and respect for the person's right in the middle of processing this deeply, because there is a responsibility, Colin. And you've been naming it. You're saying, look, trace. This is the way I interpret what you're saying. You're saying trace the dots, trace where this is leading, because responsibility can be approached in different ways. You've got legal. Is legal great? No, well, it gets overturned and it flip-flops itself. Institution is on its ear. People are going, geez, look how corrupt institution is. Or, look at the latest files that have been leaked that's implicating governments and institution. It's horrendous. And humanity is, throughout the planet, having these moral approaches in public opinion So courts are dealing with certain aspects, right? And you brought in Norway. You're going, hang on, this is still pending. But they're sort of talking about it with overconfidence. They're going, yeah, who cares? We're getting this blasé kind of attitude that's coming through. I hear it. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. But courts are dealing with certain aspects. But there's also something very broad where communities come to terms with change, acknowledge the impact it has to be, and then move forward with integrity. Because there's also a role of collective awareness where we might call the court of conscience, right? That's what we're doing here. We're meeting at the city gates, in a way, because this is the place where people speak. It's YouTube, it's the social media forums where we can listen, weigh things together, not necessarily to condemn, but to understand and to ensure that what's learned, because you were saying future generations, they're going to just go, what issue? That this stays on the record so that it's not lost. And that's the city gates that I hope that everybody can receive, because that's the old principle about resolving issues, matters openly and responsibly within the community. So it's not hidden, it's not ignored, we're not coerced. And so I don't know, Colin, does that still resonate in moments like this? Because it isn't about assigning blame in a reactive way, although there is blame. It's about acknowledging impact in an honest way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Right. There's no one simple answer to that when it comes to, that's why this is such a complex issue. Probably something that will have to be, let's just say, if this goes, which it very likely may, if this goes to courts, the outcome of how responsibility is going to be divided up is going to be monumental. So let's just say here among us right here, okay, this is not conclusive or anything like that, but what do you think? Also in the comments, you can sign off there, sound off if you would like as well. How much responsibility is on the Watchtower leadership, and how much responsibility is on the individual person or the parents, for example, if it's a minor involved? Okay, and of course we cannot downplay the strength that religious belief has in people. Okay, we're not talking about, oh, I got duped by a Nigerian prince. No, we're not talking about that. Okay, we're not talking about just your run-of-the-mill scam. We're talking about people's belief in a divine being, right? There are people that strap bombs to themselves and kill people because they believe that's what their God wants them to do. So we cannot downplay the role that religion has in people's lives and how strong that is. Okay, so again, my question is, just to throw out there just for debate, how do we divide up the responsibility? How much is on the religion? How much is on the individual person?
I think most people joined this particular religion because of the future promises, everlasting life for you and your children, paradise earth, with full peace and security, no problems, wonderful life. Who wouldn't really want that? It's something to look forward to. They didn't, until you get indoctrinated, you don't have any concept of what's going on. And because, as you quite rightly said, before the internet, things didn't come out. They couldn't find out the answers to any questions they may have. The way that things are run, that was all hidden. It was secret. Now, because of the internet, they can't hide things quite the same. So adults have got to come to terms with that if they see it at all. But by now, and I left fully about 3 years ago. It took me about 5 years. Lockdown did me a big favor. But the fact that I can see now to come out, you then take a step back and you can see, we talk about an elephant, Matthew talked about an elephant. You have to step back to see down the side and what's behind this big block of indoctrination. And once you've done that, you can then start to see and question in your own mind, well, if that's not true, is this not true? And it's hard to come away from that and hard to adjust your mindset to think a different way. And once you can do that, then you can let go of what you've been taught. But those that can't see it, because of what they believe in and what they've been taught, it doesn't make it, they can't be blamed because that's what they've been taught to believe. And you can't ask any questions or you're out on your ear. So
Yeah.
you can't really blame the parents, only in the fact that they shouldn't have listened in the first place. And we can't do that. That's a no-no. It doesn't make any sense, that. And then you've got your children coming along that are indoctrinated by their parents, and only if they're strong enough can they actually break away. So it's a very difficult situation that people are facing, and you can't attribute any blame only to those that are actually doing the teaching and the indoctrination. So I don't know really what the outcome is, except as things go on, there is a good side to it. I've found that at least 5 people that are not witnesses that quite like the thought of what the witnesses were teaching because of this and other things as well as the child, what goes on, they would not join Watchtower. So in that respect, this especially now with the blood that they didn't know about, no way will they listen to a Jehovah's Witness. So there's been a good side to it with people that are not witnesses. So that's a positive. And I always look for positive if possible.
Very, very interesting. Absolutely.
To me, because like you can ask that question just like you would ask who was to blame in Jonestown, the people that drank the Flavor Aid or Jim Jones? And just the way I see it, just to me personally, especially after leaving, it's just, to me, there's no real value in figuring out whose fault it is. You know, I can look at it and say, oh, Jeff, you know, it's your fault that you were born into this and you bought it for 40 years. Oh, you know, my dad's still an active member. Or like the people that push this on him. It's just, to me, there's no, and everybody has to kind of figure it out for themselves, but just kind of the way I figure it out is, you know, there's no, I personally don't see anything positive or constructive or any value in trying to figure out whose fault it is. The situation just is what it is. And, you know, after I decided to leave, then I had to unpack the situation as a whole and just, you know, point, because I think, so when I first woke up and figured all this stuff out, yeah, I was blaming and I was very, very angry. And I'm always going to carry some of that with me, but part of letting the anger subside or being able to manage it is just to make, you know, blaming somebody or holding a specific person or group responsible is just, for me, not important. So I mean, that's just kind of how I unpack that question.
Okay, so the question I was asking was, and you're absolutely right, Jeff, you're absolutely right. Okay, however, just to kind of rope everyone back into where I was going with this, okay? So when we talk about, okay, from the legal point of view, because if this goes to court and a precedent is set, okay, they're going to assign, because you know exactly what Watchtower is going to do, right?
I see.
I mean, the same thing they did with shunning and with disfellowshipping, and it was your choice, right? And they put it back on the person, they put it back on the congregation, right? Like you disfellowshipped us, and it was always your choice. You could speak to them. We don't get involved with, so they're passing the buck off on somebody else. So I'm just, and I'm not saying in that case I have a clear answer. Yeah,
I hear where Jeff's coming from, and I hear where you're coming from as well, Colin. And I see a way to bridge the two, if
Right.
if I may.
What's
Can
the
I
legal
try?
responsibility?
Yeah, I'll give my
Well,
thought
how
after
are they
Matthew,
gonna-
but go ahead.
Yeah.
So,
how are they going to chop
Jeff,
it up?
correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but what I heard from you, Jeff, and this is where the real value is. The real value is not getting stuck in fault finding in a way that just keeps people in pain. Am I correct that that's where you're coming from? You're going, let's move on, folks. Let's not rehash the trauma. We've had enough trauma. Let's move on. I'm happy with that. Great. Done me a favor. It's now in the distant past. Am I sort of in the right direction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the same time, though that is very, very valuable, Jeff, what I also hear from Colin, and maybe you can just say, no, Matt, you spiraling out of control. No. At the same time, when something changes, especially something this serious, it's natural for people to now ask, how did that come about? How did the beards thing change? How did all of these changes come? Because there is an awareness where there is responsibility pushing back for people who are trapped, and they might be our loved ones. So not necessarily to blame in a negative way, but to understand so that we're solution oriented, and it isn't abstract, because when decisions are made in good faith under a certain understanding, and we might have a daughter, we might have a son, we might have a grandmother, somebody close to home where it's intimate, where they're trapped, or somebody who's abused, who's saying, Jeff, Colin, Sheila, help me! I'm stuck here. What do I do? I'm in this terrible situation. To now say, okay, we can now freely identify that you have got this weaponized disciplinary thing in place, and Colin's talking about it, saying, listen, disfellowshipping, removal, this is the weaponized thing, which isn't necessarily about, on the surface, let's keep the congregation clean so people aren't smoking, fornicating, and stealing, and, all of this stuff. It's more to do with the liability part, because the question of responsibility here isn't about attacking. So we validate where you're coming from, Jeff. Yes, you're right. To be stuck in re-traumatizing, that's not cool. That really isn't. But it's about making sense of that experience to say, listen, the reason why they're actually making changes is because there was the correct pointed pressure in the right direction that landed in the right spot where they were going, we're feeling the heat. Hear it. We don't care what you believe. Look what happened to Anthony Morris. You don't want the same thing to happen. Stick to the script, because it's getting pointed and it's getting sharper, because the responsibility is on us. We are institutionalizing people's consciences and governing it, whereas actually their conscience should belong to themselves. They should have the ability, without this tight regulation, where they can apply conscience to say, oh, yeah, I might shun you today, but tomorrow I can forgive you. Mm-hmm. Does that bridge everything here? Yeah, okay.
I see, but so with Colin framing it from a legal liability point of view, I would say that the governing body, the organization, is responsible. And the reason I can say that clearly, 40, 50 years ago, we didn't have the understanding of human psychology that we do today. There's certain principles, there's certain things that we have understanding of as far as, getting people under high control or coerciveness. There's certain things that we understand now that clearly point to the situation we're looking at with the organization, where they're using these tactics. Yeah, everybody has their own conscience, everybody has their own thinking or whatever, but we do have a clear understanding of what it means to put somebody under undue influence, and that's exactly what they're doing. So if you want to frame it as far as legal responsibility, I would put it on the organization.
Well, thanks for letting me interject there, Colin. I saw a way to bridge.
Yep.
And that was, and Colin, thank you for that. I appreciate
Colin,
that.
are you talking about now or years ago? Because there's a difference. Because
no, I'm talking about in a, let's say, a near future here, if because of this decision if the blood issue goes to court, because somebody might sue the organization, somebody that lost a family member, okay, they're going to assign responsibilities, because the defense of the Watchtower is going to try to say, well, we never told you to, that was your decision, that was your family member. So this is going to happen, right? This is coming. It's going to happen. So I'm just getting us all here to brainstorm and think about really about how much. And I agree what Jeff says, and I agree what you said, Sheila, that the majority of the responsibility is on the organization. Okay. In fact, if you look at any of the Shepherd the Flock of God manuals, in the chapter that deals with disfellowshipping procedures and reasons, disfellowshipping offenses, one of the prominent ones is where it says a person in the congregation who willingly receives a blood transfusion. Oh, well, there we go. There we go. Voila. That's one of the first most prominent disfellowshipping offenses, is willfully taking. So what Matthew was saying about this coercive punishment, which to the detriment of the organization, right? That's in print, and many people have it. You can get it offline, including you can get it offline. That there is a consequence if you make a medical decision that does not go along with the doctrine that they taught us, right? Yes. So this is the doctrine. This is what we taught you. Yes, you can make your own decision, but if you do, guess what's going to happen? This. So is it really a decision? Are you really free to make that decision? If the consequence is you're going to be removed from your
and I think the state and the courts now have the tools to tackle those questions. 20, 30 years ago, they didn't really have that. Now today they do. And I think the organization can, they're going to have to frame it like, oh, the person can do what they want. And okay. But nowadays, like I said, if you look internationally, the governments and the prosecutors are learning how to use the tools they have to break the organization's arguments down.
And I think they've also seen now a pattern, a modus operandi of the Watchtower, because we saw it in many of the court cases that happen in the United States. They saw it in Australia. They've seen it now in Norway, in Sweden, right? Where all of a sudden they throw this back on the congregation members. Like you just said, oh, well, you can, when it comes to blood, you can make the decision you want. Aha, yes, that's true. But take it one step further now, right? You can make the decision that you want. You're free to make the decision that you want. We're also free to punish you, right? Mm-hmm. That's what they never mention. They get as far as, oh, but they can make their own decision. You can talk to your disfellowship family member. We won't stop you. Yes, but you'll be shunned for it, right? And I think that courts are starting to see that now. This is happening more and more. And if we get, like I said, this will be monumental. If we get a court case, if we get a lawsuit of a family who allowed a child to die because they refused a blood transfusion based on the doctrine that they learned as Jehovah's Witnesses, that's going to be huge. It's going to be huge, guys.
But so to me, because I'm thinking about the other side of that coin as well, is just the way they frame the whole changes or whatever. So my mother, she had terminal cancer and died in the 80s. And if you look at the doctrine today, the way that they changed everything, they're allowed blood transfusion. Well, if you look at the allowances they provide, it wouldn't have helped her anyways. She still would have died for having not taken a blood transfusion. I mean, and I have to ask her cousin, the details, but as I understand it, the blood issue did come up. I don't know I'm curious to find out more details now, but as I understand it, it did come up. It created a lot of problems with my mother's family who weren't witnesses. But, fast forward now, my dad is still an active member. But I have to wonder what he thinks when he hears this, where it's like, okay, so they make this announcement, but let me break down what they allow now. You know what? If this were the same thing 40 years ago, it wouldn't have changed anything. And if it were me, if I was still in, I would have, just to me, and I would have to think, that doesn't seem right. Yeah, they make this change, but in the end, it really didn't change anything. And if the person gets to a point where they're open to thinking critically, well, would a loving God, let's say that it would have changed something X number of years ago. Okay. Would a loving God put somebody through that much hurt? Would a loving God allow somebody to suffer that way? Not even the person that died, but the people they left behind. Would a loving God be okay with seeing all those people suffer the loss of somebody else?
Yeah.
And I hope so. I have to hope somewhere there maybe not a lot of people, but there has to be people out there that start, putting the pieces together that way.
Colin.
Sorry.
Oh, can I make way for Sheila? Sorry, Sheila.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This something changed from about 2012, and it seems to be that the Watchtower, as an organisation, a real estate corporation, has split from the religious side, and somehow the Watchtower lawyers' legality is overruling the religious side. The religious side is becoming redundant because it's costing too much money in lawsuits. They could well do without the religion. They function quite well. They're a very rich organisation as a real estate company. And I think they're forcing the religious side of it to kowtow to their requirements because they want the money of the free labour to build the buildings that they can sell. It's costing them more to keep the religious side on. If they let that go, then they would have to admit liability. So they're coming out with these different, to me, excuses, reasons, clarification. Call them what you want. It's not going to stop because the courts are going to have to go after the secular part of it, which they can't because it doesn't fit into the equation. They can only go after the religious side, and that's what's taking the brunt of it. So I don't know what the answer is going to be for it. It would behoove them to say, oh, we'll wash your hands now of the religious side. We don't need them, because they don't need them. They don't need the money. They don't need the free labor. They don't need the slavery. They don't need anything like that. And that's how I'm seeing it at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking too about what Matthew was talking about a while ago, like his opening comments, I think, as far as seeing a break, like a fracture within. Yeah. Seeing this whole announcement thing, I have to wonder what somebody who is fully practicing would think. And the reason I say that is because there's somebody I know who knows that I'm inactive. And I had a conversation with this person. I said, look, I'm going to, because we have to interact, through work or business or whatever. And I said, I'll be upfront now that you told me that you're a Jehovah's Witness. Like, I'll tell you, like, I'm inactive. Like, I just haven't been going to meetings, but that's where I stand. I think it's fair that you know that. But then I was like, I'm not disfellowshipped or anything. I'm just not going to meetings. And like her first response was, oh, they don't call it disfellowshipped anymore. They call it removed. When she said that, the first thing that came to my mind was like, wow, just how somebody can just take that almost without thinking and just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in my mind, it's like you and I both know. I mean, well, I know, yeah, removal is absolutely nothing different than what I just said. But in your mind, because they kind of spoon-fed you this new word, this new term, and that's the word you're going to use now, you're just good with it. So if that's the common thinking, or if there is a, you know, certain, I guess, faction of witnesses who think that way, there's going to be plenty of people who say, oh, the new blood thing, and they're just going to take it and go with it without thinking. And the reason I can say that pretty easily, at least to me, is I remember every now and then we would get those new like blood cards, and they would have the talk at the service meeting about the blood cards, and they would hand them out and people would sign them. How much thought did most people really put into that? Like, at least from where I was from, not much. So, you know, just kind of using that past experience, people are going to have the same thing. Oh, they changed the doctrine. I'm just going to take it and run with it. Okay, it's fine. I'm not going to think about it. But at the same time, going back to what Matthew was saying is, as far as a break or fracture, there's going to be people who look at this and see it completely different from those who just go along with it.
Colin. Sheila, of course, got down to brass tacks with the.
Yes.
I mean, it became night and day, didn't it?
Yeah.
But now, what Jeff has mentioned here, if we zoom out a little bit more, this is what's current. Okay, there's this blood change, but take into consideration other changes, because along comes in the congregation a sincere associate says, Colin, hey, you the CO. CO visit, love it, okay? And says, Colin, or Matt, Colin, get together 2 elders here. you know, I want to fill in my blood card, but I've got a few questions because the fractionalization confuses me. I'm genuinely, I don't know, what is this? Gamma globulin, can I take it? You know, what about all these other little components? And, you know, do we call this medicine or it's not blood? But when I look back, there was mass blood harvesting in order to run it through a centrifuge and get out these components. And Colin, I've worked it out, and guess what? I look at a blood bag and it's 75%. I can take 75% of that blood bag, right? So what's going on? Why am I filling in this card? Do I just say, well, I don't accept 25%? And what 25%? Can you help me with the logic? And this is where it starts to get a bit blurry with this. You can donate your blood, because to get that 75%, which Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed according to a conscience matter in the fractionalization or the division or the derivatives that are coming from that, which all add up to this jigsaw puzzle of 75% of a blood bag, they're going, but there's no Jehovah's Witness that'll donate to harvest that, because that's still wrong. That's still wrong. But if you want a gamma globulin injection, they say, no problem. Even this erythropoietin, there wasn't always synthetic erythropoietin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know who wants to run with that. I don't want to sort of dominate things.
Well, I was a bit of a cycling enthusiast. I used to follow the sport of cycling, and blood doping and EPO was a huge thing with that. So
yeah.
I got familiar with that stuff on the sporting side of it.
So yeah, you're not allowed to have the hamburger. Don't you. If we see you walk into McDonald's and order Big Mac, you're out. That's it. Full shunning, Jeff. That's it. KO. Red card. But you can have the lettuce. You can have the tomato sauce. You can have the bun. You can have the sesame seeds. You can have the actual patty itself. But if we find you eating at McDonald's, you're out. But you can have 75% of that burger.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what. Yeah. Yeah, you can take all the ingredients separately, take it home, and make a hamburger. Just don't tell anybody, right? But you can make the same hamburger at home.
I
But that's
will
what
say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
On the lighter side, when I was hearing Loesch, because everybody talks about he never said the word transfusion. What did he say? Like, you can have your blood given back to you. I'm paraphrasing. When he said that,
Yeah, he was very careful. He was very careful.
I thought when I heard that, I'm like I'm gonna go to the hospital and act like they stole my blood. Like, hey, give me my blood back.
Yeah. If that helps you, in your mind, if that helps you to justify it. Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying was, okay, if you're asking me, let's say, okay, I'm going to say that I'm a practicing witness right now. Okay. According to what Loesch said, since it's my personal decision now, okay, he didn't say anything about 75%. He didn't say anything about fractions. He didn't say anything. He just said my own blood. So I take that as 100%. I can take my blood. You're not going to know anyway. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to go to the doctor, right? And what I do with my own blood is my business. So but each person is going to interpret that, right? But one thing I wanted to mention, Jeff, was just maybe a different angle here that might give you some food for thought about what happened with your mom
at McDonald's.
and with your mom's situation, and I appreciate that you're so open and honest about probably either way what they allow now wouldn't help her anyway. However, the angle that I look at that from is that, let's say, okay, gracias, mi amor, gracias. 40 years ago, okay, regardless of whether in your mother's time when that happened, whether she had the choice to do that or not, like they do now with this new announcement that they made, she wouldn't have done it anyway. She wouldn't have done it anyway, right? 40 years ago, even if at the very least she could have had that option on the table, right? If they would have made that decision at that time, at the very least, they could have said, well, the doctor could have said, you know what, this probably isn't going to help you anyway, but I mean, the option's there. We can try it, but it's not going to help you. At least the option was open to her. But the reality is 40 years ago, there's no way. Yeah. She didn't even consider it, because I know that way back in the day, especially like in the 80s, early 90s, I remember those days, like you said, when they gave the talk and then after the meeting, everyone went around and you filled out your blood card. As far as I remember, including myself, nobody marked off the blood fractions. Nobody did. Everybody was just like, no, I'm not taking blood. No blood. It was just easier that way. Instead of going through, like Matt said, sitting down with the elders later on and going through, how much is this and what is this white blood cell and what is the plasma and how much of that can I take? No, everyone was just like, you know what? In my mind, I always said, hey, you know what? No. Yeah. I never believed in that. I never believed in it. I just said, blood is blood. Blood is blood. A blood fraction comes from blood. I'm not taking any of it.
But you know what? Going to the culture, the JW culture, because I think there were a couple of people in my congregation that, I don't know what they did, but I kind of knew their thinking, like they were the type of people that would push back. But if you were the type of witness that did that asked the questions, that went to the elders, that went to the circuit overseer, you would have been marked as the elders as a problem. If you were the type of person that sincerely wanted to know, they would have targeted you as being a potential problem. And that, in my view, that's the way the culture functioned.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they probably would have looked at that as something as, like, you should already know that, right? Like, oh well, if you're filling out the blood card today, you should have that figured out. They don't really want to help you,
Yeah, like in my congregation, when they would have like the business resolutions, there were a couple of times where there was always maybe one or two people that would kind of push back. Okay, let's have a congregation vote. Okay, who all's for it? Who's against it? And there might be the one hand that went up. Like, hey, there's legally nothing wrong with you saying no. But everybody else is kind of like, okay, this person needs to get in line.
Yeah. I was that person, Jeff.
Yeah.
But
How did I know that?
yeah, surprise. But I'll tell you how that happened. If you received a letter, right, specific, and I say Sister Susie Sue, right? Sister Susie Sue or Joey Joe writes in and says, by the way, there's a stack of money. It's a dissolved estate, or it's half of my estate, or whatever, or I want to give half of a house or property or whatever. Can you please specifically donate this to those in need before it goes to www? I'll tell you what my experience was, and this is why my hand goes up, right? In a place like Midrand Assembly Hall, this is an incredible hall that went 3 times over budget in Johannesburg, right? And it's all painted black, and it's dramatic, and it's state of the art, and each chair has got its own air conditioner facility. Persons have invested in that, but they never activate the air conditioners. So they get a donation with a letter that says, yeah, here's the money. Make sure that it addresses the local needs first. And I remember in one of the business meetings with the branch, directors, signatories, fiduciaries, the whole lot, right? Branch coordinators there. And they said, right, can we forward this thing to Worldwide Work? And I go, hang on, don't we have a letter? And then other hands went up and they said, yes, we've seen the letter. Yes. The coordinator who was sitting behind me gets up and is red-faced, just like the Prince of Darkness. Gets up, goes to the front, and says, this is not how we do things here. Get this in your head. We have always forwarded that money to www. Irrespective, because it's even distribution towards the worldwide work. You cannot favor the local needs above worldwide work. And it created the fracture. And when he got up red-faced, he lost ground. And that's why he was getting furious, because it exposed things then and there. But he took control of the situation and said, no, you can't override the branch. I'm stepping in right now as coordinator. This stuff is getting forward. Finished, closed, end of story. Thank you very much. Pray on it and get your, and Gray watching you. Watching you. That's what happened. But it didn't, you can sort of excuse it as a one-off. But when it becomes a pattern over and over again, and you're seeing, gee, that's why they've got this thing. It's not about tax. It's not about how much you can retain in your local account, because that's what they say. They say, oh yeah, we don't want to overstep for tax regulations and auditing, and it creates a problem there if we're holding certain amounts. Yeah. We had so much here, we could put it into flats, rent them out, and the brothers would never pay ever again. That was the degree of self-sufficiency that we had, because we got to that stage. You didn't have to donate. And they pulled in your 20-year-olds, came down with tight little suits, and we're going, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? And put your elder brethren on the spot and said, no, we're basically muscling you out. No. New guy, new circuit overseer suddenly comes in, and they overrode the whole lot and started now selling all the Kingdom Halls. Said, oh, you guys were retaining this in your name. We'll show you exactly who's boss, and you guys are going to pay. It became retaliation. They're going, you're going to pay other congregations to get for their transport, and you are going to pay for this. These are people who have already paid for the land, and retained things in their name, and created self-sufficiency so that people were never down and out. We had Congolese Congolese brethren living on the beach because they'd escaped war. And we were told from the branch, no, shove them on the bus. We're gonna send them back to the Congo. I said, why? They've escaped from the Congo. By the way, those guys, you know where they are? They're in New York right now. Every single the local guy said, no, we're not having a stand. We're not going to stand for this direction from the branch. I was amazed. It was a glorious moment. Every single person got a job. Every person was housed. Everyone was fed, not just for 2 weeks. That thing went on for like about 6 months to a year. And I was like, wow, this is a shining moment here where persons have now been given dignity. We had brethren from Congo crying their eyes out and saying, you know what? We have been bounced from congregation to congregation to congregation. We don't even feel human anymore. And you've now made us elders, which is what we were. We were pioneers. We were elders in the Congo. And we've been put out because of lithium mining, which is now supplying all the tablets that the organization says you've got to have because it went digital. Our kids are the guys that are shoveling this minerals into buckets to supply the organization for these things. And you know what we're told? We're told we're going to have to live on the beach and be given food aid by United Nations, who is according to teaching the opposite of the kingdom. Okay, so Colin, I'm getting out of hand. I'm sorry about it. This
It's unusual in that.
Yeah, but this is what happened. So look, we seeing it. This information is out there, isn't it, Colin? I mean, this is obvious stuff, right? But yeah, you're getting to see how
it's amazing. It's amazing that when, and it's not on an organizational level; it's on a local level. If a local, like you're mentioning there with that situation, that it's amazing. How did we come to this? That when, let's say, a certain congregation actually starts helping somebody, it's not the norm. It's not the norm. And eventually, at some point, they're going to be told to stop.
Yep.
Oh, no, we don't. Just like what I think some time back we talked about, I had some videos about how I think it was with what happened in San Diego and all of that with the fires, and also in Hawaii, where they're telling people like, oh, well, you go to the government, you know, go get help from the government because that's not, we're not here for that. Oh my God.
So Colin, what happens next to the congregation that actually did the Christian thing? What happens next?
Right.
Maybe we should get that out to the audience.
Yeah.
Because you know what happens next.
Let's put it out there. What happens next? Tell us.
Oh, okay. I was sort of hoping you were going to. Okay. Confirm if I'm right or wrong. They send in their needs graters. They flood you with needs graters. Yep. Vote the Kobe out. Vote the service committee out. You guys, cheers. Yep. We don't care. Or make up libel and slander. And I caught them doing this red-handed.
Yes.
I go to the file and I go, you guys are editing the file.
Yeah.
I can see you've edited this is just not. And they go, Matt, it's our right to make the mistake. It's our right to make the mistake, but I recorded it. I put it on record. I said, right, that's it. You run the record because I have done this. How many years now? No, you've had how many warnings? 1, 2, 3. I believe it's beyond 77 times. And I have got persons on the doorstep crying their eyes out that brother so-and-so is busy abusing people and he's on the convention program. How the hell are we letting this happen?
Yeah. Yep.
How are we letting this happen? And of course that's, oh, you've got grudges, Matt. You've got a grudge again. You're out. And I'm going, well, you know what? I'm like last man standing because you already eliminated the good guys. So what's the point of me coming here if I'm just going to go, yes, no problem. So the whole strategy that comes in is if you are coming solution oriented, you're dealing with things in the Christian way to be self-sufficient and sustainable. That doesn't fit in with the business model, and that's what it is. And that's coming back to Sheila. The whole thing has been hijacked. And the spiritual content isn't there. That's what we've absolutely seen. And as soon as that gets out, which is what has happened in the fracture, which is why this leak on the blood thing happened to begin with, is because you've had persons like maybe I've trained who are now sitting on service desk, or they're in all kinds of positions, and they're going, Matt, we thought you were crazy. And you know what? No, you're not. I heard it. I heard it from the horse's mouth. And by the way, I was standing next to the governing body when you sent in a letter via courier that had to be signed, and I saw it get refused. And I saw it go to coordinator's office, and they dealt with it, and here it is on the cell phone. There's their conversation. And I go, are they named? And I get a phone call from the branch. Colin. And I know exactly who it is. I can identify who it is. And he says, please, Matt, don't name us. Please don't name us. We want people to see that this is coming from Jehovah in soft tones, beautiful soft tones. Yes. We want people to see this is coming from Jehovah. And I'm going, this is why you're medicated. Excuse me for this, but I know that's got its place. But I'm going, you knowingly are taking that thing to drown out the mental conflict that you know is affecting people in this negative way.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes. And this is a symptom that we have in common. We've all seen this. Imagine we've all been, and we all are in different parts of the world. We've got Sheila, sounds like she's probably in the UK. Matt's in South Africa. I'm in Honduras. Jeff's in United States. And all different continents here, and we've all seen these same things happening. Absolutely, it's mind-boggling. It really is. It's mind-boggling. And you're right, Matt. You're right. They are medicated, some of them, to quiet down the internal conflict that they have going on inside themselves. They're struggling because they know in their interior that what they're doing is not right. They know it.
Well, that's how the leak came out. I've been warned, don't talk about it, but I'm going to. Because the leak came out before Friday, and I'll tell you where it came from. You think it's lower tiers? Nope. It's not lower tiers. This is what I did. Before I made moves, I decided, right, if governing body don't want to make comments, I'm going to get their family to make comments. Let's put their family on the record. Because as soon as their family goes on the record, guess what they have to do? They have to create fracture in their own family in the same judicial or tribunal process, removal. And now it's going to touch close to home. It's going to really touch close to home. And they did it. Colin, they made comments and they said, we are outraged at this. This is an absolute injustice. And I went, great. Now you're on the record. Now I'm going to throw it exactly back to you. You've just given the prescription for exactly what you've created down here. This is what's happening. And they went, big fright, because what did they do? They put it in writing and they put themselves on the. And you know what? As soon as you get that out, that's the strategy that you must apply. The Matthew 18 thing falls on its sorry little misused head. Because they cannot fight against that. That's their own doctrine. And the more that's exposed at the city gates out in forums like this, spiritually they've fallen apart. That's why 98% says, oh, you know what, Colin? Jeff, everybody, 98% has taken a certain medicine that was brought in a doctrinally compromised way that even the Catholic Church was saying we're outraged about, so that the Pope had to intervene and say, by the way, for the greater good, everybody. No. If Jesus was here, he would say, don't worry about it. So he's giving his administrative gesture or his wave to just say, don't worry about it, folks. If we had something better, we would do it. Except that later on down the line, time reveals everything. And it says, no, you should never have gotten involved in this thing. Anyway, it was a big business abuse and it's scandalous. But the damage has already been done, which is why the church is in its fracture and in its crisis, and persons are going, well, we don't believe in this anymore. Not even the priests, not even the cardinals. They're going, whatever. And JW just said, we're bypassing this. Why? Because we're getting advice from Massimo Intravine, who is bowing towards the Pope and kissing his ring. And what did we do? We went and attacked the Catholic Church. You think he's going to come in trained as a Jesuit or trained in all the various anthropology things that he's trained in and come in? You know what? I would be very benevolent to JW, or you know what? I'm going to carry out the Pope's plan and make sure that when I give you the so-called advice because you're desperate and you don't have anybody trained to make a defense in court, that we've also put some kind of leverage to make sure that you guys are spiritually compromised. And so 98% announced to the world in a governing body update that they at world headquarters have compromised on a Moloch Baal principle, which was taught in Gilead that should never happen. The Gilead guys, the units, I've got the units, they said this should never happen. So now 2% of the governing body is still standing. Who's that? Ghislaine Messe in France. What does he do? Gathers people of integrity. He says, look, don't look at the messengers. Let's just go according to the rule book. Apply it and see who stands. And so you could say in a theatrical way, some will say, oh, that wasn't valid. You say, but it's a messenger. Even a child can say, look, do you measure with up to that? Like the Naaman and the child who says to him, look, you need to go and visit the prophet. In a way, that's now shown that the whole thing has broken apart. Anybody who's actually spiritually aware or spiritually awake goes, well, where are we going to gather the 2%? Because they're unrepentant. They're not even aware that they've contravened. But the persons who are aware are not coming forward repentant. And even if you take it just as psycho-spiritual manifestation of Jehovah, and you say Jehovah's an egregore and doesn't really exist, or you say this is a Freemason construct, or Martini, the Spanish monk, it's his construct. Even on a human level, we still carry supreme ethics or natural law. There's no way that this thing can actually stand. They've torpedoed their own system. And Frere Messe, bless him, okay, because I know that he's taken heat for this. People say, oh, you're not legitimate, you're not a real elder. I go, you want to know something? And shake your hand because you actually delivered the correct message. And even if they weren't disfellowshipped or removed, they disassociated themselves by the actions. And the fact that this happened now is a symptom of that. Thanks for listening, guys. You dignify it, so thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just bring up another point about?
Go ahead, Sheila. Absolutely.
There was something unusual in his dress. I've never seen a governing body member in a brown, very, very ordinary suit, no watch, the only one signet ring. He looked like he was in sackcloth. And I just thought, wow, there's something going on there.
Yeah, well, that's I think comes back to what we've all kind of observed. Whether it's a subconscious thing that they're trying to create in us or the viewers, but there's definitely worry in Lush's countenance, in his mannerisms. There's worry, there's discomfort, lots of things, and the clothing as well. That's not lost on Jehovah's Witnesses, the meaning of sackcloth, right? When, of course, they're not going to ever come out directly and apologize for something, but the appearance of sackcloth is, by the law, the Mosaic law, was a sign of great distress. It was a sign of repentance, of when you were pleading to God because of a stressful situation, because of a dire situation that was going on. So that could be subconscious ways that they're trying to manipulate the public into seeing that, hey, we're really sorry about this. We're really distressed, I should say. They didn't say any of this, of course, but the ideas that it gives me is that they're worried. They're worried about.
Let's go into their mentality, Colin. Are you ready for this one? So Sheila's right on point again. Bang on, boing again. And here's how it plays out. Say, for instance, there's major pushback. You know what happens? Gerrit Loesch is no longer a member of the governing body.
Yeah.
On, and he's got a bungalow, brand new, over here.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Gerrit was getting old. You know what? Let's talk to Gerrit. I'm suddenly very vulnerable. This is what they pull. This happened to me in research. Oh, Matt, you know what? You're quite right about what you've pointed out. Oh, this goes on the record. You're right. And I'll have it transcribed. Okay. Oh, you're right. Matt, sorry. No, not sorry, because sorry, you're not allowed to say sorry. They tell you directly you're not allowed to do this, not at this level. And they go, I'm getting really old. I'm medicated. I'm like this. I'm getting forgetful. But as soon as it swings to them having an advantage, you watch how sharp they get. They get incredibly sharp. But the only reason why I'm mentioning this, as soon as it's an individual, they go, no, you only had Gerrit on JW broadcast. We told you that it's only when we're together that's the faithful and discreet slave. He acted independently. Oh, and he sewed that in. Well, his video is coming down tomorrow. That's exactly what they do. And we've seen that play out before.
And they'll probably do it.
Oh, where did we see that happen? Anthony Morris,
exactly. I was just going to say that Loesch might be the next Morris.
Yeah, it's set up for that, isn't it?
I think he's just. It's going to sound wrong, but he just looks like too old and tired to really fight back.
Yeah, he does.
So he's going to be the kind of fall guy that just go out there.
Did you see
Bingo.
the October annual general meeting a couple of years ago? And Loesch introduced 2 new members of the governing body. When they showed the annual general meeting in the October, Loesch frowned when he announced the names. When it was went out onto the January broadcast for all to see, he smiled all the way through it. So they took that frowning out. But he was dressed in a navy blue suit, which is what you normally see the governing body in.
Yes.
So they're setting him up. They're either setting him up, or this is how he feels in his brown sackcloth. I think it's a personal thing.
May I add to that, Colin and Sheila? May I add to that, because that was the last AGM that I attended.
Right.
And if you saw it, if you saw the whole thing, did you see the John D. Watchtower ritual that they performed? Gerrit Loesch was the one who held up the golden mirror, which is used. Do I need to finish this, or you know exactly where I'm coming from?
No, please. I haven't heard this one.
So the John D. ritual, I'll have to fact check this one. It's 1700, somewhere there. Anyway, John D. Watchtower ritual. Fire, earth, wind, water. It's those 4 pillars, right? So you got the 4 pillars. Maybe I've mixed it up because I'm on the spot and I feel the heat. But John D. ritual. Okay, that's my anchor point. John D. ritual. They performed that at the annual general meeting. So you're walking in underneath the doorway, which has got the marking. You know, the Jews touch the Magen David. Yeah, they touched, and the little scroll on the side, right? Kiss that. So you go in to the annual general meeting, AGM or AM, it's often called, right? It used to be Stanley Theatre, and you've got all the various assembly halls, okay? So you go in there, and there's a pyramid with the needle as you're walking in. You go, what's this symbol? So okay, fine. That's just an arrow pointing in, okay. Then Gerrit goes with the mirror, which you look at the old Black Spiritism magazine, and you've got the guy underneath the cloth with the mirror, right? Then you go to jw.org, and you see the governing body with the smoke around them, which is in their own literature. They say that is called, what is it, Ghostbusters stuff, this green fluid. What do they call that? Ectoplasm. Ectoplasm. Yeah. So they say that manifests. You go out into Africa, that's happening, or you go into these spiritual practices, it's coming out of it's an awful, if you ever see it, it's an awful thing. But they examine these cells and they go, geez, this is coherence. What the hell have we got here? But anyway, you go to the jw.org and you've got a picture of this with these egregores and golems in the smoke. And you go to the Spiritism magazine, you're going, okay, so on Wednesday, this thing's turned into a seance. That's what's happened. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's happened. And there's the guy on jw.org with the computer, with the golem there, and you've got the governing bodies sitting around there, and you're going, okay, hold on. I think that is pareidolia. That's what I'm seeing faces. It's pareidolia. It's got plausible deniability. Until you take it to a top-tier psychologist, and you say, what do you see there? He says, oh, yeah, I see golem from, like Lord of the Rings, or one of these ancient paintings from the master artist. I say, yeah, which master artist? And they start naming where the image is, and you can start doing an image search, and you superimpose it, and you go, this is exactly what they're saying at the California Institute for Human Studies. Sean Esbrun Hargreaves, who's got a PhD in this. This isn't just coming from nowhere. He's able to look at it and correlate with other PhDs, and they pick it up immediately. And they say, listen, there isn't a media artist worth their salt that would never pick this up. This has been deliberately inserted in there. This is an extra layer that's been put in over Photoshop, and they still haven't taken it down, even though it's exposed. It's not manifesting daisies, it's manifesting golems, because it's an egregore thought tulpa. That's what it's exactly doing. And so this thing happened in the annual general meeting. They performed this ritual. And the way they did it, Colin, the way they did it in the uncensored version was they went, oh, Christendom's coming down, false religion's coming down, which is the same Rutherford thing, where he says, oh, religion is a snare and a racket. So they do that in front of inebriated elders or persons who don't have the education, or persons who are absolutely in the know, but they're incentivized, secret handshake. You want to call it Freemasonry, whatever, but within that enclosed, trusted, incentivized circle. And they go, oh, well, Jehovah is going to bring down false religion, and they show in projectors all the imagery that's needed for a John Dee ritual in front of everybody. And you mention it to a fellow elder, and you say, did you see what happened there? And he goes, oh, I don't know. Because he's compartmentalized and marginalized because he hasn't got the education. He's not able to identify this. As soon as you go to a top-tier psychologist and you say, oh, tulpa or egregore or these kind of archetypes that are placed in, he goes, yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's the power of education. That's the power of saying, well, Colin, you know what? You can't go to higher education. Naughty man. What do you think you're doing? Which is again, if you come and zoom out, that's been freed up because of what happened in Japan. They did that analysis on what happened with what was called the Church of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, formerly Mormons, and said, no, we don't like your programming because it put one of our politicians into peril. And it's on the record, and we've had to investigate it, and that's why they changed that rule. So it's coming crashing down. So just to talk to build upon what Sheila is saying, yeah, he's in sackcloth. That's exactly what's happened. Take these signals. When Mark Sanderson wears a tie with Norway, you think he isn't signaling? He absolutely is. I've met him. I've spoken with him.
Oh, yeah.
He ain't stupid. He is not stupid.
No. And I'll tell you guys one thing, and an apology, a preemptive apology if there are any German viewers. Okay, this is not a blanket statement, but I've only had 2 experiences with in the upper echelons of the organization with German brothers, and I don't trust any of them. I do not trust these German brothers in high places because they're very intelligent. One of them is Garrett Losch, and the other one, if you want to learn more about him, was the former branch overseer when Central America had branches. They no longer do it. It's all they closed all of them, and it's all from Mexico now. Mexico handles basically all of Central and South America as far as literature and all of that. But back in the day, each Central American country had a branch, Bethel branch, and in Honduras, the branch overseer director was Werner Sinke, right? I made a video about him a while ago. Werner Sinke, and he was the same way. Very, very sly person. Very sly personality, and behind the scenes, not the same person that you saw up on the platform. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what was going on. And it was really an eye-opening experience that I had at a particular being, let's say, just a regular, obedient, run-of-the-mill Jehovah's Witness. Of course, I was like an acting elder in this congregation at the time, so I had gotten to that level. But I was brainwashed, right? I was indoctrinated since I was born. I was born into the organization, so I thought that everybody acted and believed the way I did. That this was real. That this was, when you were at an assembly, this was something important. You were supposed to be paying attention. You were supposed to be listening, and we had a large. It was a national convention in Honduras. So it was all of this was like 2005, right around there. All of the congregations in Honduras came to San Pedro Sula, to the Olympic Stadium, and we had a 3-day district convention there. And of course, people came from Nicaragua, people came from El Salvador. So all in all, there was like 50,000 people there. And, so I remember in between talks at that time, one of my my first daughter was like a year old, and we spent most of the time outside of the stadium. My wife at that time had lots of health problems, and I remember running into Werner Sinke. He had just come down from the platform giving a talk. If you want to learn more about him, there's a yearbook. I think it's around 94 or 97 yearbook where there's a section just about him because it's about Honduras, and it talks about him. Anyway, I ran into him and kind of told him what was going on. He's like, yeah, come with me. Come on over here with me. And he took me to, or they would put up these temporary signs all around the convention site, like, oh, this is expediting, this is first aid, this is lost and found. So they had the administrative office where all of the upper ups were, the branch overseers and the circuit overseers. And so he brought me in there, and I expected to see, people sitting and being very attentive to the program, which was a very, very difficult program because of the heat. And, it was just way more people showed up than what they expected. And I go into the administrative office, and here are all of the, circuit overseers, branch, the Bethel members, with a feast in this room. Nobody's watching the program. Nobody's listening to anything. They have a TV in there. They have a table in the middle, as I said, with a feast on it, a smorgasbord of all of the most luxurious food you can possibly imagine. Whereas outside, you've got 40, 50 plus thousand people from all these other towns. Like, we had to travel from like 2:00 in the morning on a bus that we rented to get to the stadium on time. And you got people eating sandwiches, eating beans and tortillas, and here you've got the branch overseers with this just luxury, all of this food, fruit, little fridges full of sodas and full of, I mean, just the lap of luxury. And that was one of the first things, even though at that time I was still a witness, but I saw that and it just fractured my mind when I saw that. And I thought, this is what's going on during the convention. This is what they're doing. And of course that's a really insignificant thing, but it just shows you that what's going on behind the scenes is not what you think it is.
Yeah, he was coordinated since 1978 or something.
Yeah. He was there a long time. Yep.
So
he was there. He
was part of branch committee. I mean, that was a
very
100% company.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
The Sinkers were company men, 100%.
Colin, may I mention a disclaimer to protect your channel here, or to protect the video? Can I do that?
Go right ahead, of course.
So yeah, look, we Survivor friends, or we Survivor community that have come in, that are very interested in things. We might have some slightly differing viewpoints or whatever. And this is Survivor, and it's also surpassing whatever abuse we've come from. And I've been looking at the comments there, and Bourne says the more we believe, the angrier we got when we woke up, and at least that's what I've seen and lived. And I hear myself getting off here. But we come in, for anybody that looks at these videos, like you say, an observer or somebody who's in law enforcement, or somebody who's even in Watchtower, or a third-party company that they've hired to look at these things. We say, look, whatever's being discussed here, this is a thesis in process. It's being developed, because we're putting things together, like stringing the dots and saying, how does this work? Am I wrong? Am I right? Is this validated? Not. So the thesis is always to be approached with antithesis, for synthesis, with a healthy skepticism, and it's the essential critical thinking that we apply to these things. So we don't claim that we've got all the answers. We're just throwing these experiences, our viewpoints or whatever. And maybe we're right, maybe we're wrong. Maybe there's a pattern here, maybe there isn't. So if somebody wants to challenge it, by all means, then please do. But that's the process until we come to exactly what it is that is going on behind the scenes, until we're able to analyze these things correctly. Colin, does that sound reasonable?
Absolutely. Absolutely does. And thank you for that disclaimer.
Thank you for
what are we here? These are 4 people. We're just a sample. We're a sample of the entire community in all of its different manifestations, because we're all at different stages, and there are different levels of confusion, there are different levels of anger, there are different levels of all of those things, depending on where we're at in our journey of waking up, which I think everyone should understand that is never something that's going to end. You don't get to a point that, oh, well, that's it, I'm healed, I'm done. It's an ongoing, because we're always discovering new things, and and also as we come into this journey, we meet others who are coming up also. Maybe they already they're at a place now where we passed a long time ago. We have to help them. So this is an ongoing process. And what I want this space to be is that we can manifest, and we can express all of those different levels of emotions and things that we're feeling in a safe environment where we're not going to be judged, we're not going to be criticized. And always, unlike when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, who claim to be the one-all and know-it-all for everything, they have an answer for everything. We don't claim to, and we don't want to necessarily, right? We simply want to have a space where we can question things and try to make some sense out of what we're going through in community with other people. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, and maybe protect persons that are actually crying out for help. Who are saying, "Geez, I'm
Absolutely.
sick."
Yes. And that's something that also, whether it be um, contact through my channel or with anybody else that is here, um, anybody there that's or here right now that is watching, if you are in a position of danger in any way, whether it be uh, doing harm to yourself or someone else, please reach out to somebody. Okay? Please reach out to somebody, whether it be myself or whoever you might feel comfortable talking to. Um, we might, I might not necessarily have the answer for you in the moment, but at least we can point you in the right direction so that you can get the protection and the help that you need. Okay. Um, yeah. Bourne says, don't let my flame throwing reflect on anyone else. Yeah.
Well, Colin, thank you very much for your kindly way of handling it. And Jeff, thank you also for just eating. I can see your cogs turning, and I just appreciate your presence. And of course, Sheila, I'm a
Thank you,
big
Sheila,
fan.
for being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So, as I said, this is going to be ongoing. I think we haven't seen the end of more issues coming up related to this topic. We might see some more things happening on jw.org. We might see some more movements within the governing body, and we might see some legal action. And of course, we're always pending on the Norway Supreme Court decision, which is the jury is still out on that one. So we're still waiting for that to see what happens. And just stay tuned, everybody. Okay, stay tuned and hang in there, everybody. Hang in there. Okay, remember that you can reach out to any one of us at any time on my channel. Of course, my email address is always available, or you can just make a comment on a video. I always get notifications, so reach out if you need to. Okay, and I want to thank Matthew, Sheila, Jeff. Thank you for being here with us, and we're going to end the stream, and we'll be in the after party for a few minutes.